Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining me from and whatever time you're watching. And thank you so much for joining. Um, so today we are discussing a very important case. It's the State versus Makwanyane case. Uh, I'm sure that each and every one of you knows it. If you are hearing this for the first time, good, thank you. Okay. So just imagine for 1 second, a country has just come out of apartheid, right? Violence is everywhere, crime is rising, people are angry, society wants justice. And then the Constitutional Court is asked one massive question. Should the democratic South African state have the power to execute human beings? That was the question in the famous case of State versus Makwanyane. And guys, this was not just another criminal law case. This case defined what kind of constitutional democracy South Africa wanted to become after apartheid. So, in today's video, we're going to unpack the facts of the case, the constitutional issues, the court's reasoning, the role of Ubuntu, and finally, I'll give my own critical analysis of whether the Constitutional Court got this decision right. And trust me, if you are doing constitutional law, this is one of the most important cases you'll ever study. Now, let's dive right into the facts of the case. So the accused in this matter were Mr. Makwanyane and Mkhunu. They had been convicted of multiple murders, attempted murder, and robbery with aggravating circumstances. The trial court sentenced them to death. Now, remember, guys, this happened during a very important transitional period in South Africa. The country had recently adopted the interim constitution, and for the first time, constitutional rights were supreme over parliament. The accused then challenged the constitutionality of the death penalty itself. So the Constitutional Court now had to answer the question: is the death penalty consistent with the new constitution of South Africa? And that immediately transformed this from a normal criminal case into a constitutional law case of enormous importance. So, now, guys, the court looked at several constitutional rights. The first was the right to life, right? Section 9 of the interim constitution stated that every person had the right to life. Don't get this wrong. This was section 9 of the interim constitution, right? The second was human dignity. The constitution recognized that every human being possesses inherent dignity and must be treated with respect. The third was the prohibition against cruel, inhumane, and degrading punishment. The court therefore had to ask, can the state deliberately take life while claiming to protect human rights and dignity? And this is where the case becomes deeply philosophical, because the court was not only interpreting the words, it was interpreting the moral direction of the new constitutional democracy. So now, let's unpack the judgment itself, right? The leading judgment was written by Arthur Chaskalson, right? The court adopted what we call a generous and purposive interpretation of rights. So, in simple terms, this means that the court said constitutional rights should not be interpreted narrowly or technically. Rights must be interpreted in a way that gives people the fullest possible protection. So the court emphasized that South Africa was moving away from a past characterized by violence, oppression, and abuse of power. And because of that history, the new constitutional order had to be built on dignity, equality, freedom, and respect for human life. Now, one of the strongest parts of the judgment was the court's discussion of human dignity. The judges explained that the death penalty destroys dignity completely because it treats a human being as an object to be eliminated by the state. And the court also stressed something extremely important. the death penalty is irreversible. If the state executes an innocent person, that mistake can never be corrected. An unlawful imprisonment can be fixed, compensation can be paid, but execution is final. The court also examined the issue of arbitrariness. They noted that factors like poverty, race, quality of legal representation, and social inequality often affect who receives the death penalty. And remember, guys, this was especially serious in post-apartheid South Africa, where race and poverty were deeply connected because of apartheid itself, right? So the court therefore concluded that death penalty violated the right to life, human dignity, and the prohibition against cruel, inhuman, and degrading punishment. As a result, the death penalty was declared unconstitutional. So now, this is the part that makes this case uniquely South African: Ubuntu and transformative constitutionalism. Several judges, especially Yvonne Mokgoro and Justice Pius Langa, referred to the concept of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the idea that a person is a person through other people, right? It emphasizes humanity, compassion, reconciliation, dignity, and collective respect. So the court essentially said that a constitutional democracy based on Ubuntu cannot respond to violence with more violence by the state itself. And this becomes part of what we call transformative constitutionalism. The Constitution was not simply about controlling government power, it was also about transforming the society itself after apartheid. So, this judgment symbolized South Africa's attempt to move away from revenge and state brutality toward human dignity and constitutional morality. Okay. Now, let me give my own critical analysis. Now, this is me personally, right? I think the judgment was legally and morally powerful because the Constitutional Court correctly understood that the constitutional rights become meaningless if the state itself can deliberately destroy life in the name of justice, right? I also think that the court was correct to place dignity at the center of constitutional interpretation because once the state claims the authority to eliminate human beings, it risks reducing people to objects rather than rights bearers, right? However, I also understand the criticism of the judgment. Many people argue that the court failed to fully appreciate South Africa's violent crime realities, right? Critics also argue that victims and their families also deserve justice. Society needs protection, and severe crimes deserve severe punishment. Some also argue that the death penalty may deter violent crimes, right? Although evidence on deterrence remains heavily disputed, even internationally. But here is the deeper constitutional question. Should constitutional right depend on public anger and emotion? Because constitutional democracy exists specifically to prevent majoritarian emotion from overriding fundamental rights. And I think that this is ultimately what the court protected in Makwanyane. So the court chose constitutional values over revenge. So whether one agrees or disagrees with the abolition of the death penalty, this case permanently shaped South African constitutional law and established human dignity as one of the foundational values of the Constitution. So I need you to tell me, down on the comment section, like that this famous case of State versus Makwanyane was not it was not only about death penalties. It was about about defining what kind of a society South Africa wanted to become after apartheid. So I need you to tell me on the comments what your opinions are, right? Because this defined a society based on dignity, humanity, and equality and constitutional supremacy. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, or if it did help you somehow, please like the video and then subscribe to my channel, because I'll be unpacking more South African case laws. I also do a breakdown on South African law modules and exam preparation in a way that actually makes sense. So you can leave me a comment below, but I want to leave you with this question. Do you think the Constitutional Court got it right in abolishing the death penalty? I'll see you in the next case breakdown or in the next video. Thank you and have a good one.